What started as a dream home quickly turned into a real-life mystery novel, except the ending hadn't been written yet. There's something about old homes, the kind built before the world got loud, before cities swallowed forests and people stopped looking over their shoulders. There's history in the walls, sometimes more than anyone wants to find. For Leah and Marcus, it was supposed to be a fresh start. They'd been together 6 years, married for 2. After a messy layoff and a few months of couch surfing between friends and family, the offer on Rose Hill Manor felt like fate. They could never have afforded something like this near the city. But out here, an hour outside town, in a place most people had never heard of, it was possible. 8 bedrooms, 5 fireplaces, a dusty greenhouse out back, and enough overgrown garden space to feel like they were living inside a forgotten storybook. Too good to be true? Probably. But they didn't ask too many questions. The first few weeks were a blur of unpacking, fixing leaky faucets, and navigating the strange layout of the house. There were staircases where you didn't expect them, doors that opened into walls, cabinets with locks but no keys. The locals weren't much help. A few curious looks at the hardware store, a woman at the post office who went quiet when Marcus mentioned the address. "Oh, the old Cresswell place," she'd said, then changed the subject. Still, the house was beautiful in its way. During the day, sunlight spilled through the high windows in golden beams, and Leah would wander from room to room imagining what kind of lives had been lived there. She started photographing it, thinking maybe she'd post it as a renovation project, maybe even go viral. But nights were different. The house felt bigger at night, too big. The air carried a strange stillness, as if something waited for them to fall asleep before it exhaled. Sometimes Leah would wake up at 3:07 a.m. exactly. No noise, no nightmares, just awake, heart pounding. Marcus joked about it at first. Maybe it's the ghosts adjusting to their new roommates. But on the 3rd night in a row, when Leah swore she heard someone walking down the upstairs hall, he stopped laughing. There was one door that bothered them more than the others. At the far end of the 2nd floor, past the bedrooms, past the small nursery with the torn wallpaper, there was a heavy oak door with a tarnished brass knob. It was locked, always had been. They found no key among the dozens left behind. It didn't make sense. Every other room was accounted for. Floor plans showed nothing unusual, but the door was real, solid, and completely sealed. "Storage," the realtor had said with a shrug, "probably nailed shut for safety. Some of these old houses have weird crawl spaces." Leah tried to believe that, but it never stopped bothering her. The day she found the diary, it had rained for hours. The kind of slow, steady rain that turns the sky gray and makes time stretch. Marcus was out running errands. Leah decided to finally sort the library. A narrow room off the east wing, filled with warped bookshelves and yellowed paperbacks that hadn't been touched in decades. As she moved a framed landscape off the wall, the corner caught a loose panel. It snapped forward slightly, revealing a hollow space behind it. She froze. Inside, wrapped in a thin strip of rotting cloth, was a small leather-bound journal. Brown, soft to the touch, unlabeled except for a faded year, 1957. The first page read like the beginning of a confession. March 3rd, 1957. "He said I imagined it, that it was the wind, but I know what I saw. The light was on in the room again, the one they never go in, the one they locked after it happened." Leah stared at it. No names, no details, but something about the handwriting was unnerving. It was small, neat, deliberate, and pressed deep into the page as if the words were being forced out. She kept reading. March 5th. They still won't talk about it. They pretend nothing's wrong. But I hear her crying at night. Through the vent. I think she knows I know. March 8th. They've started locking the front gate at night. Father says it's for safety. But I saw the men bury something in the garden last week. I wasn't supposed to see that. March 10th. I think she's gone. No names, no ages, No events explained. But the entries continued, broken thoughts scattered over pages. Mentions of whispers behind walls, of a smell coming from the locked room, of something missing from the family portraits in the hall. When Marcus got home, Leah was still sitting on the floor, journal open in her lap. He took it from her without a word and read the first 5 pages. "This is real," he finally said. Or at least, someone thought it was. "We need to know what happened here," Leah said quietly. Marcus looked up the staircase. The air felt thicker somehow, like the house itself was listening. That night, they explored the house with fresh eyes. Every creak became a message, every shadow a possible clue. In the attic, they found a boarded-up vent that connected directly to the locked hallway below. In a linen closet, Leah found a rusted hinge that looked like it had once belonged to a child-sized bed frame. And on the back of a drawer in the master bedroom vanity, carved faintly into the wood, were 5 letters, a D-E-L-E. Leah's fingers trembled as she traced the letters, her mind racing. "Adele," she whispered, as if saying the name aloud might somehow unlock more of the mystery. Marcus leaned in closer. "Who's Adele?" "I don't know," she said, pulling her hand back. "But whoever she is, she meant something here." They stood there for a moment, the quiet of the house pressing in. The words in the diary echoed in Leah's head. "I think she's gone." Who was Adele? And why was she the only name to make it into the walls? "Maybe it's a clue," Marcus said, finally breaking the silence. "Maybe it's not just a name." Leah nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. "Yeah, but what kind of clue? What are we supposed to do with it?" Before Marcus could respond, the floorboards creaked upstairs, a slow, deliberate groan that made both of them look up. They exchanged a glance. "Is someone up there?" Leah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Marcus replied, his voice tight, "but we need to find out." They made their way upstairs quietly, as if trying not to disturb the house's sleeping secrets. The door to the locked room at the end of the hall loomed like a silent sentinel. Leah felt her pulse quicken as they reached the base of the stairs, eyes glued to the door, their breath held. The journal's words haunted her thoughts. The one they locked after it happened. What happened? And why lock the door? Marcus reached out to touch the knob. He hesitated, then turned it. The door creaked open slightly, revealing darkness inside, a stillness that made her heart race. "I don't think we should go in there," Leah said, her voice low. She knew it was irrational, but something about the room, the air, made her want to back away. Marcus hesitated for a moment, but then pushed the door fully open. The darkness beyond the threshold was suffocating, like something in the room was swallowing the light from the hallway. But he stepped inside anyway, and Leah followed, drawn to the mystery. It was a small room, much smaller than she had expected, the walls bare except for a single faded portrait of a woman. She stood in an old-fashioned gown, her eyes distant and hollow, as if something had been taken from her long ago. Leah's eyes narrowed. The woman in the portrait looked like she'd stepped out of another time, a faint smile on her lips, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus was already rummaging through an old chest near the corner of the room. His face was lit by the flickering light from his phone, and as he opened the lid, he froze. "What is it?" Leah asked, stepping forward. Marcus didn't answer at first. He simply pulled something from the chest and held it up. It was a small, delicate ring, gold, with a faded gemstone in the center. Leah's stomach dropped. Where did that come from? Marcus stared at the ring for a moment as if the answer was staring at him, but he couldn't quite make it out. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to Adele." The room suddenly felt colder, the silence heavier. Leah stepped forward, unable to take her eyes off the ring. It felt like it was calling to her. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaky, "I think we need to know everything about Adele and the Cresswells. If there's one thing this house is hiding, It's her." Marcus nodded, tucking the ring into his pocket. "We'll start looking. Tomorrow. For now." He trailed off, his gaze moving back to the portrait. Leah followed his line of sight and realized that the woman in the picture was staring directly at them now, her gaze somehow darker, more intense. "Let's go," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I don't think we're alone here anymore." As they turned to leave, the door creaked shut behind them on its own. The next morning, they drove to the town's small library, hoping to uncover anything about the Cresswells, the house, and Adele. The place smelled of dust and old paper, and the librarian, a woman with thick glasses and a kindly smile, looked up from behind the counter as they entered. "We're looking into the history of Rose Hill Manor," Leah said, glancing at Marcus. The librarian's smile faded slightly, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she led them to a back corner of the library where a collection of town records and old newspapers were kept. She pulled out a few thick volumes, handing them over with a soft sigh. "Be careful," she said softly, her eyes flicking toward the door. "Some stories are better left untold." Leah and Marcus exchanged an uneasy glance, but they didn't have time to waste. They needed answers. As they flipped through the papers, they found mention of the Cresswell family in the local history section. The family had lived in the house for decades, and it was said to be a place of great wealth and influence in the early 1900s. But after 1957, the family had all but disappeared from the town's records. There was one mention of a tragedy, a fire, devastating, that had destroyed most of the family's possessions. But no one knew the details. The fire had been ruled accidental. The house had been rebuilt, but the family never returned. "Something doesn't add up," Marcus muttered, flicking through another page. Leah's eyes caught something, a black and white photograph of a group of people standing in front of the house. They were all smiling, but there was something about the way they stood that felt off. She zoomed in on the faces. There, standing at the edge of the group, was a woman with the same hollow, distant expression as the one in the portrait. Her eyes were the same, too. "Adele," Leah whispered, her finger hovering over the image. She was part of the family. The librarian, hearing her, turned back. "Adele Cresswell," she said softly. "She disappeared after the fire. Some say she never left." Leah's heart skipped a beat. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but it didn't feel like a story with a happy ending. Leah's voice dropped to a whisper. "What happened to her?" The librarian lowered her gaze, her lips pressed tightly together. "Some things stay buried." Marcus put the papers down, his face grim. "We need to go back to the house. Now." They didn't speak as they drove, the tension between them growing heavier with each passing mile. The closer they got to Rose Hill Manor, the more the air felt charged, like the house was waiting for them. When they arrived, the house was unnervingly still, as if it had been holding its breath. They walked inside, and the familiar silence pressed in on them. Then, as they passed the bottom of the staircase, a loud thud came from above. Something, or someone, had dropped something heavy. Without a word, they raced up the stairs. At the top, the locked room door was wide open. They stepped inside, hearts pounding, and that's when they saw it. Inside the locked room, the air was thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the space, but enough for them to see what lay in the middle of the floor. A small child's bed. It was old, its frame a delicate wrought iron, the paint chipped and faded. The bed was made neatly with a blanket that looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades, and yet something about it seemed wrong, out of place. Leah stepped forward, her heart in her throat. This is where she slept. Marcus's eyes were fixed on the corner of the room, where a small wooden box sat, half hidden beneath a stack of old books. He moved toward it, his hand trembling as he picked it up. Leah's gaze fell to the wall behind the bed. A series of faint markings, scratches deep and jagged, ran along the wood. They looked like something had been clawing at the walls from the inside. Then she saw it. In the corner, next to the box Marcus was holding, was a small piece of paper, curled at the edges, stained with age. She rushed over and gently picked it up. It was a photograph, a black and white snapshot of a young girl. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and full of something, fear? Or maybe it was longing, and behind her, just barely visible, was the faint outline of a figure. Someone standing in the shadows, watching her. Leah felt a chill creep down her spine. Marcus was holding something now, a small, delicate locket. His face was pale as he turned it over in his hands. "Adele," he whispered. This was hers. Leah stepped closer, her gaze flicking from the locket to the photograph. Something about the whole scene felt suffocating, like they had stumbled into a memory that had been locked away for far too long. She didn't need to say anything. Marcus was already piecing things together. He opened the locket, revealing a tiny, faded photograph inside. The same girl, only older now. Her face had the same hollow, haunted expression. "Adele," Leah murmured. "She never left, did she?" Marcus looked at the photograph in his hand, his jaw clenched. She didn't leave. She was locked away, like the room, like everything in this house. They locked her away, but she was never really gone. A sudden crash echoed through the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, dragging footsteps from the hallway. Leah's heart raced. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice tight with fear, "we need to leave. Now." But Marcus didn't move. He was staring at something on the floor, something he had just noticed in the dim light. A trail of small, dark footprints leading from the bed to the door. They were fresh, as if someone, or something, had been walking in and out of the room just moments ago. Leah felt the temperature drop sharply. The house was alive with the sound of creaking floorboards, like 1,000 whispers coming from every direction. "Leah," Marcus said softly, his voice shaky, "we shouldn't be here." Before she could respond, the door slammed shut behind them. The house seemed to groan, the walls tightening, the air thick with the presence of something ancient and restless. The darkness in the room felt alive now, swirling around them, and Leah could have sworn she heard a voice, faint, echoing from somewhere beyond the walls, beyond time itself. "Leave, before it's too late." Leah's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him toward the door, but the moment they reached for the knob, it rattled violently, as if something on the other side was fighting to keep them in. The house was angry now. "Get out!" a voice screamed, not from the walls, but from behind them. Leah spun around. Standing there, her face pale and gaunt, was the woman from the portrait. Adele. Her eyes were wide, her expression twisted in anguish, but it wasn't fear. It was rage. "You must leave," she whispered, her voice carrying an unnatural weight. "They locked me in here. They buried me with their lies, but I never left. Not until you came. You brought it back." The air in the room thickened, swirling violently around them, as if something dark was awakening from its slumber. "We didn't mean to," Leah started, but the words died in her throat. Adele's eyes flashed with something dark and desperate. "You have to go, before it finds you." The house seemed to pulse, the very walls reverberating with the sound of something ancient stirring in the depths. The air was suffocating now, thick with the weight of unspeakable years. It wasn't just Adele trapped here. It was the house itself. Leah could feel the walls closing in, the house shifting, alive with things that shouldn't be. She pulled Marcus toward the door, both of them desperate now. The door opened with a creak and they stumbled out into the hallway. As they fled, the house groaned, the floor beneath them shuddering as if it were waking up from a long, dark slumber. Behind them, the door slammed shut. The room locked again, just as it had been for decades. They didn't stop running until they reached the car. Neither of them said a word as they drove away, the dark silhouette of Rose Hill Manor growing smaller in the rearview mirror. But Leah knew they hadn't escaped. The house was still watching, and it would never let them forget. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. When the first movers arrived to clear out Rose Hill Manor months later, they found the house untouched, just as it had always been. Not a single thing had been disturbed. Not a piece of furniture out of place, except for the new portrait hanging in the main hallway. It was a painting, not a photograph, of a young woman, her face serene, almost peaceful, and in the background, just out of focus, the faint outline of a locked door. The Cresswells were long gone, but the house was still there, waiting. And in the darkest corner of that old room, if you listened closely enough, you could still hear the whispers